We are back. Welcome to Another World Audiobooks. Thank you guys for tuning in. I would love to hear from you if you are enjoying this book so far. Go over to Another World Audiobooks. There's links to all the social media. You can drop a comment on YouTube, Spotify, send me a Facebook message, make a post on Facebook, tag me. I would just love to hear from you. Always makes my day to hear from listeners. And I got a comment on YouTube the other day from Sky, which is a lovely name, who said, "I love this series and you do it so well. Please continue with the next book regarding the Warlord of Mars, the last book we just finished up there." So I'm glad you enjoyed that, Sky. And yes, I'm sure we will be headed back to Barsoom at some point here in the very near future. Stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, we're carrying on with Arsene Lupin. This half of the second chapter really picks things up. Speaking of halves of chapters, I hate doing that. I hate breaking chapters up into multiple parts. It just drives me nuts. I would much prefer to do full chapters every single episode, but I'm trying to get to 12 patrons there on Patreon, and once we get to there, that's going to be kind of the breaking point that'll get us over this, so that I no longer have to split up chapters into two halves when I post them on the podcast. So if you want to make that happen, go over to anotherworldaudiobooks.com and click on support the podcast, become a patron there on Patreon, and as soon as we get to 12 patrons on Patreon, we will no longer be splitting chapters up, and I promise that. So check that out. And then, like I mentioned last time, if you know, the more patrons that come in, I think the longer the episodes can get. So we might, once we hit 12, I think I'm going to set another milestone, and after we cross that milestone, then I want to get to the point where we're doing like 2 chapters every episode. So the more you're able to help me with that, the more I'm able to help you with more awesome free audiobooks. So check it out, anotherworldaudiobooks.com. Thank you guys for tuning in, and without further ado, let's get into part 2 of chapter 2 of Arsene Lupin versus Herlock Sholmes. The heirs of the Baron d'Autrec could not fail to benefit by such notoriety. They established in the house an exposition of the furniture and other objects which were to be sold at the auction rooms of Drouot & Co. Modern furniture of indifferent taste, various objects of no artistic value, but in the center of the room, in a case of purple velvet, protected by a glass globe and guarded by 2 officers, was the famous blue diamond ring. A large, magnificent diamond of incomparable purity, and of that indefinite blue which the clear water receives from an unclouded sky, of that blue which can be detected in the whiteness of linen. Some admired, some enthused, and some looked with horror on the chamber of the victim, on the spot where the corpse had lain, on the floor divested of its blood-stained carpet, and especially the walls, the unsurmountable walls over which the criminal must have passed. Some assured themselves that the marble mantle did not move. Others imagined gaping holes, mouths of tunnels, secret connections with the sewers and the catacombs. The sale of the blue diamond took place at the sales room of Drouot & Co. The place was crowded to suffocation, and the bidding was carried to the verge of folly. The sale was attended by all those who usually appear at similar events in Paris, those who buy and those who make a pretense of being able to buy. Bankers, brokers, artists, women of all classes, 2 cabinet ministers, an Italian tenor, an exiled king who, in order to maintain his credit, bid with much ostentation, and in a loud voice, as high as 100,000 francs. 100,000 francs. He could offer that sum without any danger of his bid being accepted. The Italian tenor risked 150,000. And a member of the Comédie Française bid 175,000 francs. When the bidding reached 200,000 francs, the smaller competitors fell out of the race. At 250,000, only 2 bidders remained in the field. Hirschman, the well-known capitalist, the king of gold mines, and the Countess de Crozon, the wealthy American, whose collection of diamonds and precious stones is famed throughout the world. 260,000! 270,000! 75? 80? Exclaimed the auctioneer as he glanced at the 2 competitors in succession. 280,000 for Madame! Do I hear any more? 300,000, said Hirschman. There was a short silence. The Countess was standing, smiling, but pale from excitement. She was leaning against the back of the chair in front of her. She knew, and so did everyone present, that the issue of the duel was certain. Logically, inevitably, it must terminate to the advantage of the capitalists, who had untold millions with which to indulge his caprices. However, the Countess made another bid. 305,000. Another silence. All eyes were now directed to the capitalist in the expectation that he would raise the bidding. But Hirschman was not paying any attention to the sale. His eyes were fixed on a sheet of paper which he held in his right hand, while the other hand held a torn envelope. 305,000, repeated the auctioneer. Once, twice, for the last time? Do I hear any more? Once, twice? Am I offered any more? Last chance? Hirschman did not move. Third and last time. Sold! Exclaimed the auctioneer as his hammer fell. 400,000! Cried Hirschman, starting up, as if the sound of the hammer had roused him from his stupor. Too late. The auctioneer's decision was irrevocable. Some of Hirschman's acquaintances pressed around him. What was the matter? Why did he not speak sooner? He laughed and said, Ma foi, I simply forgot, in a moment of abstraction. That is strange. You see, I just received a letter. And that letter was sufficient to distract my attention? Yes, for a moment. Ganimard was there. He had come to witness the sale of the ring. He stopped one of the attendants of the auction room and said, Was it you who carried the letter to Monsieur Hirschman? Yes. Who gave it to you? A lady. Where is she? Where is she? She was sitting down there. The lady who wore a thick veil. She has gone? Yes, just this moment. Ganimard hastened to the door and saw the lady descending the stairs. He ran after her. A crush of people delayed him at the entrance. When he reached the sidewalk, she had disappeared. He returned to the auction room, accosted Hirschman, introduced himself, and inquired about the letter. Hirschman handed it to him. It was carelessly scribbled in pencil, in a handwriting unknown to the capitalist, and contained these few words. The blue diamond brings misfortune. Remember the Baron d'Autrec. The vicissitudes of the blue diamond were not yet at an end. Although it had become well known through the murder of the Baron d'Autrec and the incidents at the auction rooms, it was 6 months later that it attained even greater celebrity. During the following summer, the Countess de Crozon was robbed of the famous jewel she had taken so much trouble to acquire. Let me recall that strange affair, of which the exciting and dramatic incident sent a thrill through all of us, and over which I am now permitted to throw some light. On the evening of August 10th, the guests of the Count and Countess de Crozon were assembled in the drawing-room of the magnificent chateau which overlooks the Baie de Somme. To entertain her friends, the Countess seated herself at the piano to play for them, after first placing her jewels on the small table near the piano, and amongst them was the ring of the Baron d'Autrec. An hour later, the Count and the majority of the guests retired, including his 2 cousins and Madame de Réal, an intimate friend of the Countess. The latter remained in the drawing-room with Herr Bleichen, the Austrian consul, and his wife. They conversed for a time, and then the Countess extinguished the large lamp that stood on the table in the center of the room. At the same moment, Herr Bleichen extinguished the 2 piano lamps. There was a momentary darkness. Then the consul lighted a candle, and the 3 of them retired to their rooms. But as soon as she reached her apartment, the Countess remembered her jewels and sent her maid to get them. When the maid returned with the jewels, she placed them on the mantel without the Countess looking at them. Next day, Madame de Crozon found that one of her rings was missing. It was the blue diamond ring. She informed her husband, and after talking it over, they reached the conclusion that the maid was above suspicion, and that the guilty party must be Herr Bleichen. The Count notified the commissary of police at Amiens, who commenced an investigation, and discreetly exercised a strict surveillance over the Austrian consul to prevent his disposing of the ring. The chateau was surrounded by detectives day and night. 2 weeks passed without incident. Then Herr Bleichen announced his intended departure. That day, a formal complaint was entered against him. The police made an official examination of his luggage. In a small satchel, the key to which was always carried by the consul himself, they found a bottle of dentifrice, and in that bottle they found the ring. Madame Bleichen fainted. Her husband was placed under arrest. Everyone will remember the line of defense adopted by the accused man. He declared that the ring must have been placed there by the Count de Crozon as an act of revenge. He said, "The Count is brutal and makes his wife very unhappy. She consulted me and I advised her to get a divorce. The Count heard of it in some way, and to be revenged on me, he took the ring and placed it in my satchel. The Count and Countess persisted in pressing the charge. Between the explanation which they gave and that of the consul, both equally possible and equally probable, the public had to choose. No new fact was discovered to turn the scale in either direction. A month of gossip, conjectures, and investigations failed to produce a single ray of light. Wearied of the excitement and notoriety, and incapable of securing the evidence necessary to sustain their charge against the consul, the Count and Countess at last sent to Paris for a detective competent to unravel the tangled threads of this mysterious scheme. This brought Ganimard into the case. For 4 days, the veteran detective searched the house from top to bottom, examined every foot of the ground, had long conferences with the maid, the chauffeur, the gardeners, the employees in the neighboring post offices, visited the rooms that had been occupied by the various guests. Then, one morning he disappeared without taking leave of his host or hostess. But a week later, they received this telegram. Please come to the Japanese tea room, Rue Bossy des Anglais, tomorrow, Friday, evening at 5 o'clock. Ganimard. At 5 o'clock, Friday evening, their automobile stopped in front of number 9 Rue de Bossy des Anglais. The old detective was standing on the sidewalk, waiting for them. Without a word, he conducted them to the first floor of the Japanese tea room. In one of the rooms they met 2 men, whom Ganimard introduced in these words. Monsieur Gerbois, professor in the College of Versailles, from whom, you will remember, Arsene Lupin stole 500,000. Monsieur Léonce d'Autrec, nephew and sole legatee of the Baron d'Autrec. A few minutes later, another man arrived. It was Monsieur Dudouis, head of the detective service, and he appeared to be in a particularly bad temper. He bowed and then said, What's the trouble now, Ganimard? I received your telephone message asking me to come here. Is it anything of consequence? Yes, Chief, it is a very important matter. Within an hour, the last 2 cases to which I was assigned will have their denouement here. It seemed to me that your presence was indispensable. And also the presence of Dieuzy and Fauchelevent, whom I noticed standing near the door as I came in? Yes, Chief. For what? Are you going to make an arrest, and you wish to do it with a flourish? Come, Ganimard, I am anxious to hear about it. Ganimard hesitated a moment, then spoke with the obvious intention of making an impression on his hearers. In the first place, I wish to state that Herr Bleichen had nothing to do with the theft of the ring. Oh, exclaimed Monsieur Dudouis. That is a bold statement, and a very serious one. And is that all you have discovered? Asked the Count de Crozon. Not at all. On the second day after the theft, 3 of your guests went on an automobile trip as far as Crécy. 2 of them visited the famous battlefield, and while they were there, the third party paid a hasty visit to the post office and mailed a small box, tied and sealed according to the regulations, and declared its value to be 100 francs. I see nothing strange in that, said the Count. Perhaps you will see something strange in it when I tell you that this person, in place of giving her true name, sent the box under the name of Rousseau, and the person to whom it was addressed, a certain Monsieur Boulou of Paris, moved his place of residence immediately after receiving the box. In other words, the ring. I presume you refer to one of my cousins, Dandel? No, replied Ganimard. Madame de Réal, then? Yes. You accuse my friend, Madame de Réal, cried the Countess, shocked and amazed. I wish to ask you one question, madame, said Ganimard. Was Madame de Réal present when you purchased the ring? Yes, but we did not go there together. Did she advise you to buy the ring? The Countess considered for a moment, then said, Yes, I think she mentioned it first. Thank you, madame. Your answer establishes the fact that it was Madame de Réal who was the first to mention the ring, and it was she who advised you to buy it. But I consider my friend is quite incapable. Pardon me, Countess, when I remind you that Madame de Réal is only a casual acquaintance, and not your intimate friend,
as the newspapers have announced. It was only last winter that you met her for the first time. Now, I can prove to you that everything she has told you about herself, her past life, and her relatives is absolutely false, and that Madame Blanche de Réal has no actual existence before she met you, and she has now ceased to exist.
Well?
Well?
Replied Ganimard.
Your story is a very strange one, said the Countess. But it has no application to our case. If Madame de Réal has taken the ring, how do you explain the fact that it was found in Herr Bleichen's tooth powder? Anyone who would take the risk and trouble of stealing the blue diamond would certainly keep it. What do you say to that?
Nothing, but Madame de Réal will answer it.
Oh, she does exist, then?
She does, and does not. I will explain in a few words. 3 days ago, while reading a newspaper, I glanced over the list of hotel arrivals at Trouville, and there I read Hôtel Beauvivage, Madame de Réal, etc. I went to Trouville immediately and interviewed the proprietor of the hotel. From the description and other information I received from him, I concluded that she was the very Madame de Réal that I was seeking, but she had left the hotel, giving her address in Paris as number 3 Rue de Colisée. The day before yesterday, I went to that address and learned that there was no person there called Madame de Réal, but there was a Madame Réal living on the 2nd floor, who acted as a diamond broker and was frequently away from home. She had returned from a journey on the preceding evening. Yesterday, I called on her, and under an assumed name, I offered to act as an intermedium in the sale of some diamonds to certain wealthy friends of mine. She is to meet me here today to carry out that arrangement.
What? You expect her to come here?
Yes, at 5:30.
Are you sure it is she?
Madame de Réal of the Château de Crezon? Certainly, I have convincing evidence of that fact. But, listen, I hear Folifon's signal.
It was a whistle. Ganimard arose quickly.
There is no time to lose. Monsieur and Madame de Crezon, you will be kind enough to go into the next room. You also, Monsieur d'Autrec, and you, Monsieur Gerbois. The door will remain open, and when I give the signal, you will come out. Of course, Chief, you will remain here. We may be disturbed by other people, said Monsieur Dudouis. No, this is a new establishment, and the proprietor is one of my friends. He will not let anyone disturb us, except the blonde lady.
The blonde lady? What do you mean?
Yes, the blonde lady herself, Chief. The friend and accomplice of Arsene Lupin, the mysterious blonde lady against whom I hold convincing evidence. But, in addition to that, I wish to confront her with all the people she has robbed.
He looked through the window.
I see her. She is coming in the door now. She can't escape. Folifant and Douzy are guarding the door. The blonde lady is captured at last, Chief.
A moment later, a woman appeared at the door. She was tall and slender, with a very pale complexion and bright golden hair. Ganimard trembled with excitement. He could not move nor utter a word. She was there, in front of him, at his mercy. What a victory over Arsene Lupin, and what a revenge! And, at the same time, the victory was such an easy one that he asked himself if the blonde lady would not yet slip through his fingers by one of those miracles that usually terminated the exploits of Arsene Lupin. She remained standing near the door, surprised at the silence, and looked about her without any display of suspicion or fear.
She will get away. She will disappear,
thought Ganimard. Then he managed to get between her and the door. She turned to go out.
No, he said. Why are you going away?
Really, monsieur, I do not understand what this means. Allow me...
There is no reason why you should go, madame, and very good reasons why you should remain.
But...
It is useless, madame. You cannot go.
Trembling, she sat on a chair and stammered,
What is it you want?
Ganimard had won the battle and captured the blonde lady. He said to her,
Allow me to present the friend I mentioned, who desires to purchase some diamonds. Have you procured the stones you promised to bring?
No, I don't know. I don't remember.
Come, jog your memory. A person of your acquaintance intended to send you a tinted stone. Something like the blue diamond, I said, laughing. And you replied, exactly, I expect to have just what you want. Do you remember?
She made no reply. A small satchel fell from her hand. She picked it up quickly and held it securely. Her hands trembled slightly.
Calm, said Ganimard. I see you have no confidence in us, Madame de Réal. I shall set you a good example by showing you what I have.
He took from his pocketbook a paper which he unfolded and disclosed a lock of hair.
These are a few hairs torn from the head of Antoinette Briard by the Baron d'Autrec, which I found clasped in his dead hand. I have shown them to Mademoiselle Gerbois, who declares they are the exact color of the hair of the blonde lady. Besides, they are exactly the color of your hair, the identical color.
Madame Rial looked at him in bewilderment, as if she did not understand his meaning. He continued.
And here are 2 perfume bottles, without labels, it is true, and empty, but still sufficiently impregnated with their odor to enable Mademoiselle Gerbois to recognize the perfume used by that blonde lady, who was her traveling companion for 2 weeks. Now, one of these bottles was found in the room that Madame de Réal occupied at the Château de Crezon, and the other in the room that you occupied at the Hôtel de Beau-Rivage.
What do you say? The blonde lady? The Château de Crezon? The detective did not reply. He took from his pocket and placed on the table side by side 4 small sheets of paper. Then he said,
I have on these 4 pieces of paper various specimens of handwriting. The first is the writing of Antoinette Briard. The second was written by the woman who sent a note to Baron Hirschman at the auction sale of the Blue Diamond. The third is that of Madame de Réal, written while she was stopping at the Château de Crezon. And the fourth is your handwriting, madame. It is your name and address which you gave to the porter at the Hôtel Beau-Rivage at Trouville. Now, compare the 4 handwritings. They are identical.
What absurdity is this? Really, monsieur, I do not understand. What does it mean?
It means, madame, exclaimed Ganimard, that the blonde lady, the friend and accomplice of Arsene Lupin, is none other than you, Madame Rial.
Ganimard went to the adjoining room and returned with Monsieur Gerbois, whom he placed in front of Madame Rial as he said,
Monsieur Gerbois, is this the person who abducted your daughter, the woman you saw at the house of Monsieur Detinan?
No. Ganimard was so surprised that he could not speak for a moment. Finally, he said,
No? You must be mistaken. I am not mistaken. Madame is blonde, it is true, and in that respect resembles the blonde lady, but in all other respects she is totally different. I can't believe it. You must be mistaken.
Ganimard called in his other witnesses.
Monsieur d'Autrec, he said, do you recognize Antoinette Briard?
No, this is not the person I saw at my uncle's house.
This woman is not Madame de Réal, declared the Count de Crezon. That was the finishing touch. Ganimard was crushed. He was buried beneath the ruins of the structure he had erected with so much care and assurance. His pride was humbled, his spirit was broken by the force of this unexpected blow. Monsieur Dudouis arose and said,
We owe you an apology, madame, for this unfortunate mistake. But since your arrival here, I have noticed your nervous agitation. Something troubles you. May I ask what it is?
Mon Dieu, monsieur, I was afraid. My satchel contains diamonds to the value of 100,000 francs, and the conduct of your friend was rather suspicious.
But you were frequently absent from Paris. How do you explain that?
I make frequent journeys to other cities in the course of my business. That is all.
Monsieur Dudouis had nothing more to ask. He turned to his subordinate and said,
Your investigation has been very superficial, Ganimard, and your conduct with this lady is really deplorable. You will come to my office tomorrow and explain it.
The interview was at an end, and Monsieur Dudouis was about to leave the room when a most annoying incident occurred. Madame Rial turned to Ganimard and said,
I understand that you are Monsieur Ganimard. Am I right?
Yes.
Then this letter must be for you. I received it this morning. It was addressed to Monsieur Justin Ganimard, care of Madame Rial. I thought it was a joke because I did not know you under that name, but it appears that your unknown correspondent knew of our rendezvous."
Ganimard was inclined to put the letter in his pocket unread, but he dared not do so in the presence of his superior, so he opened the envelope and read the letter aloud in an almost inaudible tone.
"Once upon a time, there was a blonde lady, a Lupin, and a Ganimard. Now, the wicked Ganimard had evil designs on the pretty blonde lady, and the good Lupin was her friend and protector. When the good Lupin wished the blonde lady to become the friend of the Countess de Crozon, he caused her to assume the name of Madame de Réal, which is a close resemblance to the name of a certain diamond broker, a woman with a pale complexion and golden hair. And the good Lupin said to himself, 'If ever the wicked Ganimard gets upon the track of the blonde lady, how useful it would be to me if he should be diverted to the track of the honest diamond broker.' A wise precaution that has borne good fruit. A little note sent to the newspaper, read by the wicked Ganimard, a perfume bottle intentionally forgotten by the genuine blonde lady at the Hotel Beaurivage. The name and address of Madame Rial written on the hotel register by the genuine blonde lady, and the trick is played. What do you think of it, Ganimard? I wish to tell you the true story of this affair, knowing that you would be the first to laugh over it. Really, it is quite amusing, and I have enjoyed it very much. Accept my best wishes, dear friend, and give my kind regards to the worthy Monsieur Dudouis. Arsene Lupin." "He knows everything,"
muttered Ganimard, but he did not see the humor of the situation as Lupin had predicted.
"He knows some things I have never mentioned to anyone. How could he find out that I was going to invite you here, Chief? How could he know that I had found the first perfume bottle? How could he find out those things?"
He stamped his feet and tore his hair, a prey to the most tragic despair. Monsieur Dudouis felt sorry for him and said,
"Come, Ganimard, never mind. Try to do better next time."
And Monsieur Dudouis left the room, accompanied by Madame Rial. During the next 10 minutes, Ganimard read and reread the letter of Arsène Lupin. Monsieur and Madame de Crozon, Monsieur d'Autrec, and Monsieur Gerbois were holding an animated discussion in a corner of the room. At last, the Count approached the detective and said, "My dear monsieur, after your investigation we are no nearer the truth than we were before."
"Pardon me, but my investigation has established these facts, that the blonde lady is the mysterious heroine of these exploits, and that Arsène Lupin directed them."
"Those facts do not solve the mystery. In fact, they render it more obscure. The blonde lady commits a murder in order to steal the blue diamond, and yet she does not steal it. Afterwards she steals it and gets rid of it by secretly giving it to another person. How do you explain her strange conduct?"
"I cannot explain it."
"Of course, but perhaps someone else can."
"Who?"
The Count hesitated, so the Countess replied frankly,
"There is only one man beside yourself who is competent to enter the arena with Arsène Lupin and overcome him. Have you any objection to our engaging the services of Herlock Sholmes in this case?"
Ganimard was vexed at the question, but stammered a reply.
"No, but I do not understand what—"
"Let me explain. All this mystery annoys me. I wish to have it cleared up. Monsieur Gerbois and Monsieur d'Autrec have the same desire, and we have agreed to send for the celebrated English detective."
"You are right, madame,"
replied the detective, with a loyalty that did him credit.
"You are right. Old Ganimard is not able to overcome Arsène Lupin. But will Herlock Sholmes succeed? I hope so, as I have the greatest admiration for him, but it is improbable."
"Do you mean to say that he will not succeed?"
"That is my opinion. I can foresee the results of a duel between Herlock Sholmes and Arsène Lupin. The Englishman will be defeated."
"But in any event, we can count on your assistance?"
"Quite so, madame. I shall be pleased to render Monsieur Sholmes all possible assistance."
"Do you know his address?"
"Yes. 219 Parker Street.
That evening, Monsieur and Madame de Crozon withdrew the charge they had made against Herr Bleichen, and a joint letter was addressed to Herlock Sholmes. Oh boy, now we're getting into it. Stay tuned. Next week is going to be a very awesome chapter where you actually get to see Herlock Sholmes in the flesh in this book, and it's going to be fun. So stay tuned for that. Thank you guys so much for supporting the podcast and for sharing it. That is the best way to help the podcast grow and help me to continue to bring you awesome episodes. So go to anotherworldaudiobooks.com. A bunch of ways to support the podcast there. But like I said, once we hit that 12 patron mark, no longer splitting up chapters here. I'm really excited to get toward that. So yeah, make sure to check it out. And I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and we will catch you next week with Chapter 3.